Okay, today is the vlog for, I had to check, June 11th, Monday, June 11th, the second day of E3, which is now an entire week. Apparently, I used to think it was just a weekend, but anyway, as you may have noticed, I finally got my Agritsuko shirt in the mail. I got it actually yesterday, but I had a shirt on already, so I didn't put it on till today. I am pleased to say that it does glow in the dark, but it's sort of a weird. The way it works is it almost works best when it's low light but not really dark, because it sort of relies on the yellow, which doesn't glow, for much of the image. So it's sort of hard to figure out what's going on when you look at it in complete darkness. Also, I was unable to. I tried for the last 5 to 10 minutes or so to create a situation where I could put the glow in the dark angry face in a screenshot or in the video. Nothing doing. Just the way. Well, the problem with this thing is that it creates light by being on, which is how I have to operate the camera, which means that it's never completely dark, and in fact there's always a light shining directly at me. There might be a way to activate the camera when it's sort of shut down mode, probably a button up here, but I've figured it's not really worth all the effort for a joke that you'd be better served just finding a picture of the shirt online. So, having talked about that, second day of E3. Yesterday was mostly the Bethesda stuff with a little bit of Microsoft stuff. Today was Sony's big day, and they had a pretty good day. Last of Us 2 I didn't actually see any footage of, but people have been talking that up, and the first one was obviously a big hit. It's the same development studio, so I imagine they'll be doing a pretty good job for the second round. Tetris Effect. I don't know if I talked about this yesterday. Tetris Effect. When it was like the first year we lived here after we moved back to the Seattle area, I rented a video game for my Super Nintendo called Tetris Attack, and I probably played that game for 12 hours. And the next day, I specifically remembered wherever I looked, I could see the game's cursor. The whole idea is that there were two blocks highlighted by the cursor. You move the cursor around with the control pad, and then when you press the button, it swapped the blocks. And the idea was to line up 3 of the same color, or better. You could line up 4, 5, and even more if you were very careful, eliminating all those blocks at once, which gave you a bonus. You would also get a bonus if you eliminated 3 blocks and then the blocks on top fell, and that created more patterns of 3, 4, 5, whatever, which then cleared away blocks, and you could get combos going. Those were combos, or chains. I can't remember which one were combos. I think those were chains. Combos were just more than 3. I love Tetris Attack. It remains probably my favorite puzzle game in all of its different iterations. It was at one point released as Pokemon Puzzle League. The name of the original game was Panel to Pawn. It later came out as just Puzzle League. But this Tetris Effect seems to be the classic Tetris formula. And it's based on a term that came out of a Harvard medical study, apparently, where people who played the game for 7 hours over the course of 3 days reported a phenomenon where they were able to see blocks moving around, spaces being filled by blocks, and that was what was happening to me, only within the bounds of the Tetris game. I was seeing like drawers and cupboard doors sort of being swapped in my head, in my eyes. It was very much almost a hallucination. But what was really interesting about this study that was done is that even people with an amnesic disorder, where the short-term memory doesn't get sort of turned into long-term memory, so they have trouble remembering anything that happens to them on a day-to-day basis, they would not remember playing the game. When asked, did you remember playing this game? They said no. But they would describe the effect. they would describe this Tetris effect of the blocks, like spaces being filled in by blocks or blocks moving, falling from above, being arranged in a grid pattern. So it activates some part of the brain or some part of the nervous system that does something to us that's very strange, and it's hard to understand and explain. Certainly, if it took an entire Harvard medical study to investigate, it's a pretty complex phenomenon. It's very, very cool. Oddly enough, it's going to be a PS4 game. Tetris games are usually released on Nintendo systems, so this is a bit of a new beast. I think they probably got away with the copyright problem by naming it after the medical study instead of the game itself. I don't know where the legality in that lies, but who knows? We'll see. I'm looking forward to it. I'd like to play it if possible. What else did Sony reveal? Well, I think the big one for me was finally seeing Death Stranding. So, a little bit of a background in case anybody coming here doesn't know where Death Stranding came from. Years ago on the PS4, there was a small game, released called PT. It was created by Hideo Kojima, who was famous for the Metal Gear Solid series, but it was also worked on by Guillermo del Toro, who is a very famous director who won I believe he won Best Director at the Academy Awards this year, so he's a very good director. And the two of them got together to make a game experience that was as terrifying as anyone could make. It is the scariest thing I've ever gone through in my life. That wasn't, let me put it to you this way, because that's not actually true. I've been in situations where I actually thought I was going to die, and I actually practically went into shock. PT doesn't do that. What PT does is it messes with you on a very different level. It doesn't mess with you in a oh my gosh, I think I'm actually going to die kind of way. It messes with you in a way where you start to look very carefully down the hall for the next couple of days. You listen very closely anytime you hear static on the radio. It was a psychological experiment, and it succeeded on many levels. It had jump scares, and as I get older, I'm starting to see the value of a jump scare versus the sort of psychological buildup, which is harder to do, but has a bigger payoff. I think you need to mix both to really create something that is deeply profound and deeply terrifying. Unfortunately, Mr. Kojima and Mr. Del Toro were unable to finish their game because of a falling out Mr. Kojima had with the Konami company. He went on to form his own studio, but while he managed to get Mr. Del Toro on board for a new game and secure some of the actors that he was planning on making use of for this Silent Hills game, because that's what it was. It was actually a Silent Hill game set on the PS4. Instead, they're making a game called Death Stranding, but no one knew what it was. A lot of people just assumed, myself included, a lot of people assumed it would just be a Silent Hills game or Silent Hill game with the serial numbers filed off. That it would feel, it was have the same elements of horror, the same sort of what's going on situation, supernatural elements that Silent Hill is famous for. But as we started getting screenshots of the game and hearing more and more information, it felt very different. It felt like it was trying to do things that no one had ever done in the horror, the survival horror genre before. And today we got a first look at the gameplay, and that's definitely the case. It's a science fiction game. It has many technological elements that you'd never see in a Silent Hill game. And in fact, in some ways, it feels like a cross between a Metal Gear Solid game, which is Kojima is most famous for, with the supernatural horror you would get from Silent Hill, which is Mr. Del Toro's specialty. So, it still looks very scary, and there is some amazing imagery that they've shown off. I highly recommend going and checking out the trailer, especially the gameplay footage. It's just masterfully done. Yesterday, Bethesda revealed more about their new post-apocalyptic game, which involves a lot of nuclear blasts and the fallout that accompanies bombs of those natures and that effect it has on the world and on society. And in fact, today, Capcom announced that they were remaking Resident Evil 2, which is another game that I was so scared that I couldn't actually keep playing, even though the zombies in that game don't look at all realistic. And post-apocalyptic games generally, or the genre in general, generally falls into two different things. One is a zombie apocalypse where most life ends and then comes back to life in some sort of monstrous zombie fashion. The other is the nuclear apocalypse where destruction on a scale wipes out most of humanity and the survivors have to pick out what they can use from a land where death may not even be visible. This is something else. This is something where it feels like everyone in the world is dead or gone, but it's not zombies or nuclear weapons that done it. It's something else, and it's something that it's not even obvious. And that element of unknown, uncertainty, I think is going to do it huge favors. No one knows what to expect from this game, and that's great. It's a blank slate. It means that if they'd have no expectations, whatever comes is going to be surprising. Whether or not it'll be good is hard to say, but Kojima's been very good at making games. So I think it's probably, and now that he doesn't have Konami calling shots, he gets to do really what he wants with only the limits of his own budget to be holding him back. I think he could do something really cool. Or we're just going to find out what happens when he doesn't have anybody to tell him no, and he gets to make exactly what he wants, and it might not be what any of us want. But it looks promising, and it's probably one of the things I'm looking forward to the most, because it's coming out, I want to say, end of this year or early next year. A couple other things. I believe Enix did their show today, and it was sort of they announced a couple things that I had never heard of that they didn't give many details about. They announced that January of next year is going to be Kingdom Hearts 3 finally. I never finished Kingdom Hearts 2, but apparently there's going to be some sort of collection of Kingdom Hearts games accompanying Kingdom Hearts 3, so maybe I'll get caught up. Yeah, and I don't know. I've already gone well over my 10 minutes, so I'm just going to call it quits, and maybe I'll talk about some of the stuff that I remember from today tomorrow. So I'm Eric Spornitz, and tomorrow will be better.